Welcome to Igniting Imagination. I'm your host, Lisa Greenwood, and this season I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Sue Phillips. Hi, Sue.
Hi, Lisa. It's such a joy to be here with you.
So this season, we're exploring what it means to lead faithfully in an age where technology shapes not just our work, but our meaning-making, how we connect, how we care, how we create belonging. And we're taking our cues from Sue's new paper, Religious Leaders as Technologists, which if you haven't read it, it's a must read. It is so good and so helpful for this moment. It's available as a PDF on our website. In the paper, Sue invites us to see ourselves, pastors, lay leaders, spiritual innovators, as builders and designers of sacred experience. In a world where old forms are breaking down, Sue helps us see that we are, in fact, technologists of the Spirit, crafting, experimenting, and expanding access to what is most holy. And today's conversation brings that idea vividly to life. Sue, you and today's guests are dear friends and co-conspirators in this work, so I'd love for you to introduce her and say a bit about your work together.
Gladly, Lisa. Today, we're joined by my friend and colleague, Tiffani Jones Brown, a COO, soul diver, and daughter of the South. Tiff is on the founding team of the Workshop for Emotional and Spiritual Technology, or WESTCO, as we call it, a tech startup helping people live more meaningful lives. She's also a graduate of the University of Chicago Divinity School and an alum of Facebook, Pinterest, and Dropbox. Tiff's work lives at the intersection of technology, spirituality, and design, and she's helping us imagine what it means to build tools, communities, and practices that meet the deep emotional and spiritual needs of our time. Tiff and I and some other really good people are making an app called Tangle Life on Purpose, which you can find in the App Store. And if you'd like to learn more about our company, which we talk about in this episode, and how we try to weave spiritual practices into our everyday work, come on over to west.co and check out our story as it unfolds.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sue. So before we listen to our conversation with Tiffani, I'd love to hear what stood out for you. Tiffani, thank you for being with us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
I am so looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
Yeah. So I want to hear a little bit about, and I want our listeners to hear a little bit about kind of your journey to this moment. Now, you went to divinity school right out of college and then almost immediately landed in tech. So help us understand how you got from Hyde Park to Silicon Valley.
It feels really quick and direct and extremely circuitous at the same time. So I went to divinity school thinking I might be an ethicist. I was really studying various versions of what I thought of as religious ethics, but also just kind of exploring for myself the question of how do people find meaning in their lives? How do they make sense of what matters to them? How do they make sense of their own suffering? When I was in undergrad, I'd studied psychology and religious studies. Those were my two majors, and thought maybe I would go be a clinician or maybe I would go be a professor. Ended up, in a way, flipping a coin and ending at the University of Chicago's Divinity School, which was incredible. It was an incredible place to really think about the big questions and interrogate them with a whole lot of depth. So I really, really loved that. But there was a moment when I was looking around and watching all the people in the PhD program that I was a part of. And I was thinking, wait, they've been here for like 42 years. Like they're here for a really long time, which didn't sound terrible to me. I really loved it there. But I went to my dean and I thought, I started asking her some basically practical questions like, what does it take to study and be a professor in comparative Taoist ethics? How many jobs are there a year in that? And where do I go? And like, how much debt do I have? And, I came from not a lot of means. And so I was truly a little bit worried about being cast about into whatever place that I was sent to being massively in debt and not having, many options besides the one place where I could study the one thing that I was a little bit obsessed with at the time. So at the same time I was interrogating, thinking about all of that, my husband was working at a little startup in Chicago, a tech startup. And he had been in tech for a really kind of a long time. Like he started putting together computers when he was 13, and he was designing things all the time. And I was always doing my work and looking over my shoulder and going, I think maybe you should make it more blue or crunchy, or, I was like a hovering art director on him all the time without realizing that's what I was doing. He tolerated it somehow, still tolerates it. But I really enjoyed that. I really liked to help him make stuff and to look at what he was making and go, oh, I think if you want to communicate X, maybe you could try Y. I just sort of innately enjoyed that. And the other thing I picked up on watching him at this kind of proto startup in, I think it was River North in Chicago, was, whoa, those guys over there, they're just inventing stuff. They're just trying stuff out. And I was really compelled by that way of building. It wasn't my natural way. I would say it's not that, for example, doing academics at the University of Chicago is not inventive, but because it is, but it's using such a different part of the brain and the heart and the muscles. So I was really, really interested in that way of being. And fast forward a whole bunch of conversations and a whole bunch of decisions later, we ended up in Seattle. And there was a kind of a buzzing new tech scene there. And I got a job basically editing and writing a blog for a little tech and design firm there. And the way that I got that job, and this is the last thing I'll say, was they said, could you send us a writing sample? And I had written a paper that was maybe 11 pages long on Nietzsche. And I was like, this is what I have. And you
said that?
I was like, this is what I have. And I hope this is sufficient. And they did not read it, but they're like, she seems smart enough. I mean, she wrote that whole thing. Sure, you're hired. And so that is what landed me in the design end of tech.
Wow.
That's great. That's a great story, Tiff. Now we're going to get to the heart and brain that had you go down the coast from Seattle to San Francisco in just a few minutes. But meanwhile, I know that you had a robust religious childhood as a daughter of the South in Appalachia. Can you just tell us something about an experience from your religious childhood that informs in a real kind of almost like daily or eventful way how and who you are now as a tech executive?
Well, I feel really, really lucky to have been, on the one hand, the kind of little kid who, when faced with the free will and Southern Baptist version of fire and brimstone, thought, I'm not so sure about that part. And on the other hand, got the best and just massive doses of Jesus love. The way I think of it is, my grandparents who helped raise me, they had gotten saved in, I think they would think of it as free will Baptist tradition. And that changed their lives. I mean, it really changed their lives. My poppy who raised me, who was just a saint, I think, had been an alcoholic. He had had a really, tough time. He found Jesus, and he found Jesus in like the best way and right in time to help raise me. So I grew up with two grandparents who thought of religion as love and thought and taught me that everybody are my brothers and sisters. And so my experience, even with the kind of what people would say more extreme end of, the Baptist tradition, was suffused with deep care and humility and support. So I feel like whatever that beam of love that I got from that time of my life still lives in me. It's, I mean, I still think it's funny. I haven't thought of this in so long, but this little light of mine song, like, oh yeah, it's hanging out in me. And so I don't follow that tradition in a direct way, but I find that the Jesus way animates a lot of how I move through the world, or try to.
It's beautiful. And I know this isn't a podcast on theology, but just to note that I think there's something really profound about how someone who comes to faith through the whole movement of forgiveness and grace, how the love that they share is so grounded in that grace, right? And so your Poppy is just this beautiful witness of the best of what it means to be a Jesus follower, if you will, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
I'm
you for
nodding
sharing
my
that.
head really hard, because that's exactly the kind of Jesus theology that I got. And not only was my Poppy, for example, an alcoholic. I mean, I have many people who've spent lots of time in prison. I have a hard scrabble family.
Mm.
And Jesus, or their interpretation of their religious tradition, was so much about mercy and care and forgiveness, and really finding ways to forgive oneself in order to be more loving and caring. So I think it's a very sophisticated thing to do psychologically. But they had exposure to enough instances of grace that I think it made it a little bit easier for them, what is not very easy.
Mm-hmm.
Tiff, because you've just been talking about your family and Nanny and Poppy, I'm going to actually ask you a question we were thinking we might ask in a minute, which is, obviously, we've just mentioned you're on the founding team of Westco, and you've been really instrumental in weaving what we call ancient technologies into the everyday life of the company. I'm going to ask you to describe some of those technologies, maybe beginning with the way that Nanny and Poppy and your brother show up in your everyday work life.
Well, one of my favorite ideas, Sue, that you brought to us, and I don't know if you'd put it this way, but here's how I interpret it, is that when we come to work, we don't come alone. There are a whole host of others who trail behind us, and those others are our mentors and our loved ones and our ancestors. And so, Sue, one thing you've done that has been so meaningful in the company is to help us set up this ancestor table. So when I walk in the door every day, I see this gorgeous little table given to us by a friend, and I see all the people who I work with, and I also see my Nanny and Poppy, who helped to raise me, and some of my own people. And for me, it is a reminder, one, that I don't shed my full self when I walk in the doors. And there are people also whose care and love and attention help me to be where I am. And I think it's quite grounding. I think there's a way sometimes with work, especially if you're doing something really rigorous and challenging like a startup, that you can accidentally shed some of your fullness. And for me, the ancestor table is a way of honoring that and remembering, really, just fully remembering the fullness of who we each are. I just find it quite comforting.
It's your cloud of witnesses. I mean, you bring them, they surround you. It's how you move through the world.
Mm-hmm.
I love this.
And Nanny and Poppy are forming me now, too, because you've told me so many stories about them. And their pictures they're beaming, gorgeous pictures. I literally greet them every morning, and they have a real effect on me.
Yeah.
Because I love you, Tiff, I really genuinely love them. I feel like they're a part of my people too, in a very real way. So there's this secondary gain that is so intense and frankly unexpected, that there's that much. They carry that kind of energy and just power. So I want to just thank you for that legacy.
I feel the same way. I feel like they're not with us, but they're very alive to us. And I feel a little related in a way now to all of your ancestors, which is quite beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I'd love to stay here a minute and almost excavate, if you will, this notion of bringing ancient technologies into the everyday life of a tech startup, right? And so why do these feel these moments, and I'm guessing that's one that you've named, this sort of the ritual of greeting your cloud of witnesses, your ancestors, your mentors as you come into the office. But I'm guessing there are other ways that you've infused sort of ancient technologies into the rhythm of your life together and your work. So why do these feel essential for what you're trying to do? Why does this matter? And why and how maybe are these kind of ancient technologies, these are part of your strategy, if you will, for how you do life together and how you do the work that you're doing. How are they different from other product development strategies, and why are they important? Yeah. Does that
Sue, that's
question make sense?
completely, and it's such a good one, Sue. I don't know. I felt you nodding. Do you want to start? Or you want me to hit it? You want me to hit it?
Hit it,
Okay.
girl.
Well, I've been part of a lot of different types of product development processes, like Facebook when it was kind of early, and my husband and I had our own little design studio, and I would say, and many more. And this is very, very different, and and I think it starts with the fact that Evan and I, and then Sue and Biz and our founding team came together in a really different way for a very different purpose than what most product-oriented startups come together for. We knew from the beginning that we wanted to do something that supported the wholeness of people. We had come up, Evan and I at least, had come up through the early days of social media when it was this really kind of exciting and fun and open time. People were sharing a lot with one another in a way that we had never seen before. And it was kind of a thrill. But we also then watched that star kind of shoot up to the sky and begin to fall down in some ways. And by that, I mean, we started to notice, wait, there's all this technology that has connected us to one another, but it's sort of disconnected us from ourselves in many ways. And the kind of connection that it is designed to support doesn't always support thriving, actually, or flourishing or wholeness. So we were really animated by that, concern and I think a real care for people's true experience in this life. So that was like the baseline where we started. And I think we all had some probably version of this realization or this conviction that if we wanted to build something that really did support flourishing, then we would need to build it in a way that supported flourishing, that supported, it's almost, I think of it as almost like an onomata poetic experience, like how I am every day at work massively impacts the things that I create and make. And that is especially true in a situation where we're doing a lot of inventing and a lot of trying things on the fly. And so when I think of all of these ancient technologies and rituals that we have in place, from the ancestor table to the covenant process that Sue brought to us, to our equinox and solstice rituals that we do, to me, they are a way of grounding us in the way of being that we think is going to support the kind of invention that we want. And I will say it's hard. I mean, it's not always the case that building something new feels deep like a river of compassion. It just doesn't always feel that way. It's actually really hard to invent and make anything. And sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't. But the practices we have are like this metronome of care that I think keeps us more on a track toward the direction that we want to go in an industry and in a process that can really get unwieldy and kind of wild sometimes.
Just to add some color too, I think it's helpful for our listeners to know that the some of the people you're referring to, our colleagues, Evan Sharp, who is the co-founder of Pinterest and had just come off being the CEO, the chief creative officer of Pinterest, and they had just IPO'd a couple years before that. He was still on the board of Pinterest when we started our company. And then our other colleague, Biz, was one of the co-founders of Twitter. And of course, Twitter has just been such a dynamic force, for good and for ill. Biz would be the first to agree with. And so these are the souls that we were in a group with, and without in any way casting them as somehow needy or suffering or harmed in any way. This is the reality of tech environments that these guys have earned the knowledge that we need to be a different way in order to make something that truly felt different. And so it was like we were a ready crew of, with the same kind of struggles and hopes that anyone else who was gathering in a small group would feel. But I think that really matters. There was a level of engagement with these questions early on that ripened us for experimentation. And of course, Evan, as the CEO and the founder, really brought a conviction that this is the kind of company he wanted to make. And this is the kind of company our investors wanted to invest in. So that's part of the context out of which we have the freedom and privilege of trying new things.
That's really stunning to hear you talk about that. And I'm curious if there has been resistance or if there's been kind of a what? Like, why? I mean, or if there's been enough shared longing that there was a leaning in. I mean, you don't have to name names, but I'm just curious. Yeah.
Sue, I'm just thinking of what you say sometimes, that sometimes we're designing a spiritual refeeding program for starving people. And by that, I'm getting at, I think so many people in our industry, meaning the tech, are like desperate to build something that matters and that helps. I think it's like we have this certain kind of genius and set of skills in this industry. We can make something from nothing. It's incredible. But sometimes when you find electricity, it can be hard to know what the light bulb is. What do I put this electricity that I have into? I can invent stuff. Where does it go? And I feel like people all around me all the time, Sue, are really yearning for more of this. So my experience, and Sue, I'm curious what yours has been. My experience is that people have been really drawn to the story of Westco and to the energy of it. The people who aren't, maybe don't come apply for jobs, but I sense a real, at the very least, such a curiosity in the industry, and then also a lot of yearning. So I don't feel like the people who we've worked with have been resistant. In fact, the moment that, they may be a little like, ooh, what is this? Like, not quite skeptical, but, unfamiliar. But my sense is as soon as they experience what it feels like to do really one of Sue's rituals, whether it's small groups or covenant, the way that they feel, I'll speak for myself, the way that I feel after I do that is proof enough. Because I feel connected and I feel grounded. And any worry that, you can get like work worries creep in, like, well, if I do that, will I not be able to be productive? And, questions like that melt away because of the way that it helps. I don't know, Sue, what do you think?
Well, you're giving me truly more credit than I deserve for these experiences because they're all led by the team. All of them are designed to be led by the team, which makes a really big difference because part of what Tiff and I and the leadership team have really been committed to is expanding, is basically spiritual confidence growing and empowerment to know that we all have this within us to show up for our colleagues in these ways. It's very much framed as a gift we extend to ourselves and each other. And so everybody participates and facilitates and shares. They're all plug and play. really almost everything we do is designed to be picked up literally on the spot and from the middle of the table. And I do think that matters. But any of us who design churchy stuff are aware of the strategy of spreading leadership. It's done probably more to encourage a sense of ownership in how we work than any other unspoken aspect of it. Yeah. And the reality that a lot of people come through tech chewed up and spat out, even those who have been successful on the level with building literally multi-billion dollar companies. It's really tough. It's a very tough career. Tiff knows this too from her own experience. And so that kind of success does create its own gravity well. It's a lot of energy swirls around successful tech entrepreneurs in the Valley. And so what it buys you is the permission to be eccentric, to do weird things that other people don't understand, and to have a lot of folks kind of give you the benefit of the doubt that whatever kind of weird you're on is weird they might want to pay attention to, just as a productivity hack, if nothing else. So there's just that's one thing that has stunned me coming into this world is the amount, you can almost feel the ions. It's like being in a hurricane. The number of people and ideas that fly through our office is just, it's so intense. All to say this is protective of trying new things, but it's also a way to spread new things, which is the era we're moving into.
Well, I'd love to pull on this a little bit. And, you have both talked in different settings and even a little bit here about what really, Sue, what you call the messy middle, right? It's this sort of messy place of iteration and trying things. Tiffani, you've been talking about, it's this sort of fast movement of trying things and you may not have used the word messy, but kind of insinuated it's a bit messy and and that kind of thing. But that's where the learning comes. That's where ideas meet creativity, meet building, meet beautiful. I'm going to use air quotes here. Products for the sake of flourishing, and so. As you think about all of that and this world, this swirl that you live in the tech world, the ions, as you described, Sue, how do you think faith communities, I'm going to pivot a little bit to our listeners, and faith communities could embrace that kind of same spirit of experimentation, adaptation, energy? I'd love for y'all to play with that a little bit.
I was just thinking, Sue, how so much of the invention process is like really not having any idea what's going to happen. So you have a goal, you have a hope, you have a vision. And then I think to invent something would, in the process that we call 0 to 1, so from nothing to a something, is really different from companies I've been in where the something has already been invented and, as we call it, scaled. And, my job is maybe just to help it stay on the rails and improve it a bit. That's a really different experience for me than when I'm pulling some idea out of the ether and trying to give it shape and form. And within that process, and I'm still learning this so much, there is a lot of growth around, I actually don't know. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. I'm going to tolerate the messiness and the crappiness of the work. The work in the middle of the mess as it's trying to get invented will be crappy. And it's like any of us who've written anything before know this. But it's easy to somehow forget when it's a group of people in a company that's incorporated and has, legal things on paper. It's crappy for a while. And I, as a person in the company who does some process work and some sort of operational scaffolding, I've realized that too much rigidity in the process and structure, if I'm too rigid with it, it actually prevents the sort of spark and beauty and accidents that create really standout work. On the other hand, if it's too loose and not enough scaffolding, people can just feel kind of crazy and like, what's happening? You feel like things are spinning out, a little out of control. And so a lot of times when I'm telling myself in the invention process, if we want to be inventive and creative, is what is the just enough structure? Like, what is the just enough process, and what is the just enough care that also allows for space to be messy in between? And Sue, I don't know, you've stepped into this tech zone from such a different perspective. I'm just curious what you would say about that.
Well, let's maybe break this down in the form of a week or a day.
Yeah.
We don't have very many meetings that are scheduled far in advance. We tend to meet when necessary to make specific progress on a specific question with a specific group of people. There are obvious caveats to that, certain leadership meetings and regular design meetings. But generally speaking, everything is much more ad hoc, which frees people up to pursue the intensities of what they're working on in any given moment. Different teams have different, I'll just call them rules about how and when they meet. So the engineers, they need more heads down time. They need to be interrupted less because coding is kind of like, it's very logical and precise. You just can't be interrupted all the time if you're going to write good code. And then the designers need a lot of collaboration, oxygen, but also a lot of imaginative time. So everybody's running kind of on different timescales. And the question is, as Tiff just raised, how do you bring them together? So this is one example of how it affects our days, that I think congregations are so different. First of all, because congregations are essentially volunteer-led communities, and the congregations that are big enough to have staff tend to meet with organizing a few things that everybody is involved in. And so the requirements to collaborate on a single project or program are really completely different than go and explore how to deliver group singing in your community would be the kind of question that we might ask in a startup. Or we need to bring people together and allow older and younger folks to breathe and take in big gulps of air standing in a circle indoors every week for 6 months. If you think about how choir solves a user problem, that would be the kind of problem we'd be confronted with. All to say, the kinds of processes you need to solve problems that are in the shape of congregational ones is really very different, but also highly applicable. If you're experimenting with new things, there's a lot of carryover around, understanding user problems, what are the solutions you're designing, and then asking potential users what they actually need and want.
Well, one way that might be interesting is that, and this is common in tech, is that we learn by experimenting, iterating, and trying. And so sometimes we are saying something like, the problem we want to solve is X, helping people do X thing. And the way that we are going to solve that is by building Z, A, and B. And we're going to do that in an order. And we're going to do one at a time. And sometimes, every now and again, we build like that. But more often, because we're trying to make something that doesn't exist, and I don't just mean like a spoon, a new kind of spoon. It's like the concept of spoon doesn't quite exist. So whenever I think you want to invent something like that, one way that we do it is by, okay, we think the idea is this. Let's just code it up and see, and like play with it. Or let's, design it and prototype it a little bit. And learning through the prototyping is sometimes when we're at our best. Sometimes it wastes time and we end up coding and prototyping things that we never should have, that if only we had thought through it a bit more deeply, we wouldn't have needed to spend that effort. That definitely happens. I think that happens in a lot of creative processes. But sometimes I think about one of the lines that I kept from my time in the early years at Facebook, which is, this is sort of an intense thing to say, but there was a poster on the wall that said, "Code wins arguments." And it's a really intense thing to say. But what it meant was sometimes you have to see it and feel it and try it to really, really know if it was a good idea. So making space for, let's give this some form. Let's try it out. Let's slap it together. And we do that over and over again every single week. sometimes for, very effectively and sometimes less so.
This is great. I appreciate you're getting into the nitty-gritty of kind of what you all do, and then let's kind of look at that from a congregational perspective. And I'm going to pull on a couple of threads, not knowing anything about coding and tech world and that kind of thing. So, but from a thinking from a church perspective, from my perspective, so I'm hearing a couple of threads that I think are really important to name and to pull on. And one is this notion of the problem to be solved. Now, sometimes we will caution leaders not to get into problem-solving mode, because problem-solving mode is if there's a problem, the air conditioner's broken, fill in the blank. It's solving the problem gets you back to where you were before it existed. Like it takes you back to you fix the air conditioner, now your air conditioning works. Okay. That's a very static example, but you get the idea. But what you all are talking about is you identify the problem to be solved, using air quotes, is what is something you wish were true for the sake of human flourishing in this case? In our case, it might be to help people know love and grace and mercy, or to experience human flourishing, to grow in their faith, whatever the thing is. But it's something actually that doesn't exist now that you wish did, or you think would make the world better and human lives better, that kind of thing. Okay, so problem to be solved, and how you get to the problem. Correct me if I stray here, but how you get to the problem to be solved is that whole human-centered design thing, that listening, paying attention, that sort of thing. And those feel like really important technologies, if you will, for churches to enter into, that listening, naming problem to be solved. And then I'm hearing this notion of iteration, right? In other words, try something. That's the code solves arguments, right? Try something, and then instead of saying, oh, that won't work, oh no, that will work, or just try something small, 0 to 1, not 0 to 10, not 0 to 100, but just what's the small experiment you might try? I'd love for you to, does that work? Did I hear you? Okay.
I
seeing
feel like you
the
just
nods.
nailed the invention design process, really. And I feel like what you just described, it's so helpfully put, because I think you're describing in my industry, what I think of as the invention or concepting phase and process versus the design process. And they're nested within one another. And some people gravitate toward one or the other. But the way we build, Sue, I'm curious if you'd agree with this, is that in more than many places I've worked, we build with this big sense of possibility in mind. What is the world that we want to have exist? That animates, I think, the spirit of our company. And it's a lot of the reason why I think people come and feel motivated, is because even when we don't say it, there is a sense that it's there animating our work. And so that to me is the spirit of invention, which is a spirit of hope. It's a spirit of optimism. It's why so many people who like to invent. And I think it's a really key piece to, really building something great, because you have this vision in mind, and also helping you to stick with it, because it's hard to build things. And so for me, when I can see the possibility, the hope that you're describing, it keeps me going, even when the going gets tough. And then nested under that is what I think you described as this problem-solving mode or design mode. And for me, the way that logic works is, well, if I want this world to exist, then what must I build, or who must I speak to, and what information do I need? What problems do I need to solve? What interventions shall I pursue? And I actually think that process of casting about for the problem statement, or some designers will call it the user statement, is a lot of the art, I think it can be easy to and almost misdiagnose a problem en route to a big vision. And so a lot of what we are trying to do, I think very messily, is to interrogate, within this hope, are we picking the right problem, the right intervention? And then the last thing I'll say to your point is that it tends to go a lot better when we have the right kind of input from the right kind of people. There's one way where we need to be in our own creative process and very generative and really trust our own imaginations. I think when you think of really good art, like the novelist is in their own head and heart. And I think that's a really important part of the work, like taking seriously your vision. And then, if you're going to build a product or a set of interventions or supports, then really working with people to go, does this actually do the thing that we hope it would do? Like, what do you think? What do you care about? And Sue, I just feel like you do a lot of that work for us, even though you're not out doing all of our user interviews. But in general, I feel like you're helping us to pull in the deeper human needs that, if met, are more likely to get us to that big V vision. I don't know how you think about that process, but
I'm thinking about the 2 or 3 user problems that have informed our work all along. And, one of them is people don't have enough life in their time. Another one is, how is it that enterprise calendars are the way that the majority of humans that work in the West are engaging their time?
Say more about that.
How are enterprise calendars like Google Calendar the tool in the grid, the Gregorian grid, that drives how we engage our time as human people? This is actually, the more you think about it, the more ridiculous it is. And so another of the user problems we've been trying to deal with is that people are on autopilot. How do we help people get a little bit off autopilot and live a little more on purpose? So those are very real user problems we have been trying to solve. So it's not so much like, how do we make a button that people know to press? It's, what do you actually build to help people get off autopilot? And that's part of why Tiff was talking about, which frankly are in many ways the same questions that your listeners are trying to address in congregations. We just have different tools.
Right.
Now, and of course, not every tech dwells
and a little
spaces.
different framework, but not so far from what you're describing. And I think this notion of the user problem, if you will, this feels really important for churches to be paying attention to right now, because I think if we really examine what problem we've been trying to solve, we could find, if we're really honest with ourselves in congregations, that it's, how do I get more people into worship on Sunday morning? It's, how do I make sure we don't fold, that we can continue to exist? Which is a very different question than, how do I help people know that they are beloved? And how do I help people connect in a way that helps them grow in the people growing machine that relationships are, right? And so, and I mean, those are very different questions, right? And then you design worship differently and formation experiences differently if you have those questions. If you form the user problem differently, if you will. Because I would say we've spent a lot of energy trying to make ourselves as a church appealing enough that now what we've created is good consumers rather than Jesus followers, right? And so this, I'm translating a little here, but I think this makes so much sense if we can get back to the underneath, the user problem, the user experience, and then how are we designing for that, for the end result that we hope, which is a world that God imagines, which is human flourishing and Yeah.
I'm really nodding a lot because I was thinking how so much in the process of building and designing, I'm asking myself how to ask better questions, how to get to the deeper human problem I'm trying to solve, or how to ground in that. Sometimes when I'm grounded in the deeper question versus sometimes there are just tactical questions, like how do we get more people into the doors on Sunday? But the deeper question, how do we, support a feeling of belonging and belovedness? That kind of question, for me, when I ask it, can be kind of radical if I pursue it, because it sometimes means I have to break some paradigm that I've been operating off of. Some process, some tool, some structure then has to break in order for me to honestly meet that deeper question. And I think, tech excels in some ways at pursuing questions that, when built for, break things. That's why they say move fast and break things. So there's an edge to that. Sometimes people will bull in a china shop it or flip over tables, but I don't think that's always necessary. I think there's a more graceful kind of holding of the realization that, in order to meet this important question, I need to really rethink these three things. It's more radical to do it that way. And I think that's why sometimes I don't want to do it. It's hard.
Because it's harder to do it with grace.
It's hard.
And thoughtfulness.
It's really hard. And it's not always true. Sometimes I find, like at our work, Sue, sometimes I'll think, actually, I don't need to change anything. I just need to really deepen into this X, Y, or Z practice that we're doing. We need better road mapping and just to do that more or something, some little practice that needs deepening, but some courage required.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is hard for us to get our minds around in the church sometimes is that notion of breaking things. Like, what do we have to let go of? And how do we let go of the things that we really need to let go of without losing who we are, without losing what is sacred? And I don't mean so much sacred cows as ancient sacred grounding for us. And I don't know if either of you have thoughts about how to navigate the breaking and the holding, right?
What do you think, Sue?
Yeah.
I think you should drop some wisdom right now, Tiffani Jones Brown.
Okay. Well, this is the most tactical answer to such a deep and beautiful question. But I was thinking back to when I first started at Pinterest, and it was kind of early. And even though I came to tech, you could probably tell from my divinity school background that I'm not like the techiest of tech guys. Like, I was never an early adopter of any product. But when I saw Pinterest and how it was designed, I instantly loved it. It's like, this makes me feel good. And I had just only even seen the design mocks. And so as I came into that job and I met Evan Sharp, who we work with now, and Ben Silberman, who was the CEO then, I realized that there was a special sauce that they were bringing to the development of this particular product. And it was creating a product that, unlike many social media type of platforms, was actually neutral to positive in terms of its impact on people's minds and hearts. And I kind of was asking myself, what is it about them and this that makes that so? And I realized a bunch of things. It was their kind of creative voices. It was their humility. It was their certain brand of intelligence. It was the way they'd set up the company. And so one of the things I did in the early days is I was kind of a head of brand creative director, which just meant I was responsible for expressing the soul of the company in visuals and words. And so a lot of what I did was preservative. Like, I felt like an anthropologist going around talking to Ben and Evan and to the people who work there, trying to really work out what is it that is sacred here. And what do I not want to break as this company jets off on massive growth, which it was doing and was going to do even more. It was in its up and to the right growth. That's when everything begins to break. Not always, but sometimes. So I basically just created a set of principles, and they were brand and design and sort of soul principles. But I worked with all of us and we held those. they didn't last forever, but it was this one little intervention. And really, it was about the conversations more than the piece of writing around it that I think helped me understand this is sacred. Don't break it. Like, no matter what happens, if we want to hold the soul of this place, we need to hold this. But everything else, that's on the table. Like, take it off the table, rework it, reshape it, like break it, but not this stuff. And so there's something for me in my creative work where when I'm at my best, I know what I'm breaking and I know what I will not forsake. Sort of a discernment process.
Yeah.
I think, Sue.
I want to pick up on that for 1 second and say that anybody who's been in the church world for, well, at least as long as Lisa and I have, remember the policy governance fad of church governance. The reason I'm bringing that up is because there's a concept there that always appealed to me very much, which is executive limitations, which is essentially the person who's the head of the staff or the board gives permission to the staff to do everything in their power to meet the mission of the congregation except for these stated things. But everything else, they have the freedom to do. And I feel like what Tiff just mentioned would be such a good way for congregations and leaders to act, which is if congregational leadership step into the role of discernment and identify what are the two or three things that are the soul of this community's, this way that God is expressing her hunger for connection in this community at this time. That's magic, absolute magic juice for the freedom to then go and invent all sorts of things. So that's a great example of just a discernment role. Name the soul of the place and the time. So not only who you are, but also when you are and where you are. Place plus time plus these people is I think the magic sauce. If all congregations did was identify that and then set their people free to go manifest, unfettered from other constraints, the world would be a very different place.
Yeah.
Snaps to that.
So it comes back to that core identity, that core purpose, that this language of soul, the soul of the organization, of this community. I that feels so profound and helpful. For this moment. All right. We have one final question that we're asking all our guests. So, Tiffani, what's a piece of ancient wisdom or practice that's shaping how you live and how you lead right now?
There are so many since I've gotten to know Sue, really. That
Nice.
So they're all colliding in my head right now. But I meditate a lot. And so for me right now, I'm going through a period of time where, it's the holidays and we're building stuff and there's a lot of turbulence. And so in my meditation practice, I'm practicing a lot of metta and loving kindness. And I try to practice that not only as a concept, but just legitimately feel it in my heart and then embody it and then try to beam it out and then try to bring it back and beam it out. And there's the Buddhist version of that. And then I'm lucky because I also have the Jesus version feeling of that feels a different way in my body. So for me right now, in a, big and swift and challenging time, I find that to be one of the most impactful practices that I do. It helps me show up with more care for myself and be a lot kinder to the people around me. That's it for me.
Beautiful, Tiff.
Well, it shows. It absolutely shows. So what a gift this time has been. Thank you, Tiffani. Thank you for what you are doing to infuse the world with a little more loving kindness.
Well,
Grateful.
Thank you for what you all do. And thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun. And it's always just so nice when somebody asks you good questions about things you kind of sometimes know. So thank you so much.
Nice.
Sue, thank you so much.